in order to get like the onboard the next billion people, like we need to figure out like UX. I think this like mantra has been around in the industry for a long time, but there hasn't been like a meaningful like leveling up or like kind of breaking down this like UX. We've always relied on wallets. We've always relied on like this whole key management service. And so if we really want to like break over this inspiration, at least for us, really becomes like abstracting away the entire UX. And part of this is like, there's like UX, then there's like developer experience, there's like user experience, developer experience. And one thing we're really kind of like prescient about and trying to really be really prudent about is like this agent experience.
Web3 offers a brand new petri dish.
Our job is to buy great tech at great prices.
AI is also libertarian, right?
Enable a use case that people haven't been able to do today.
The next hundreds of millions of players, they will come to the market through mobile.
My personal reason why I could be bullish in the next 12 months is BlockCrunch is not a licensed financial advisor and is purely for informational and entertainment purposes only. All opinions are personal, and the show may discuss assets that the host or guests have positions in or may be actively buying or selling. All investments carry risk, so consult with a financial professional before making any investment decisions.
Hey there, welcome to another founder interview on BlockCrunch. I'm your host, Jason Choi. I'm the co-founder of the angel fund Tangent. A topic that has been getting people really excited this year is the concept of AI agents. Now, specifically AI agents on chain. Now, there are big projects like Arweave's AO or Near publicly touting their on-chain agents as part of the roadmap. So as a naturally skeptical person, I've been a bit cautiously curious about what these AI agents actually are, but I've been digging into them a bit and found it quite interesting. And I'm very curious whether they have immediate commercial use cases, or is this another buzzword that crypto is getting too excited about? So to answer all of these questions, I'm really excited to have Sishir, the founder of Spectral, which is a protocol built specifically to create an on-chain AI agents economy, to tell us everything in a no BS, no fluff breakdown of what AI agents are, what they mean for crypto, and what Spectral is doing about it. Now, as a disclaimer, Tangent, which is my personal investing vehicle, we have a small position in Spectral as well, in the SPEC Spec token, as of today's recording. So Sishir, welcome to the show, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Good to be here.
So just to get us started, I know you guys have been building for a long time, and I remember seeing Spectral back in 2022, but you guys were focusing on something slightly different. You guys were doing credit worthiness for DeFi. So walk us through the story of how Spectral began, what led to their kind of focus on AI today, before we dive into what AI agents actually are.
Yeah, definitely. So after like DeFi summer, we saw like a huge kind of influx into like lending and borrowing. We assembled basically like a machine learning team to put together like an on-chain credit score. The point of that was really the end goal was to build out a decentralized machine learning network, so there wasn't like a single point of failure for like a single credit score. As we were designing the decentralized network, quite quickly realized we could generalize beyond just credit scores as a machine learning problem. And so this decentralized network became this kind of node network of machine learning models, which then as this kind of AI kind of hype started, quite literally, we have the same exact team. ML changed to AI, and we started evolving into like this different problem sets that we could work on. So we initially started building and training this model that could generate Solidity code from natural language. And as we were building that out, we wanted to basically use that as a base model to generate on-chain agents. And so this concept of agents building from this base model is quite similar to like ChatGPT's GPTs. So if you go to like the left side of ChatGPT and click like GPT Explorer, you'll see essentially agents that are kind of like trained or fine-tuned for specific tasks. So you might see something like a writing assistant, a data analysis, GPT, etc. And what we're trying to create is like the equivalent of that, but for like an on-chain agent economy.
Before I get started, I'm grateful for Aptos for sponsoring the show and letting us continue to make this free content for all. So here's Jerome from Aptos to tell us a little bit more. Now, Jerome, with the growth of the Aptos ecosystem, including significant increase in daily active addresses and TVL, it's pretty evident that the community is doing well. And I hear that builders from around the world are converging in Seoul next month for the Aptos experience. So can you tell us about what exactly is this Aptos experience?
The Aptos experience is an unconference. Attendees won't merely hear about the future of Web3, they'll become an integral part of it, experiencing Web3 innovations firsthand. The event is for innovators in all of us. You'll explore projects from the Aptos ecosystem and engage in dynamic discussions on the future of major verticals such as DeFi, gaming, entertainment. It's going to be fully experiential, immersive experiences. You'll get insights from renowned industry voices such as Arthur Hayes and Malcolm Demers, plus innovating companies such as Hashed, OKX Ventures, NBC Universal, Paxos, Layer Zero, BitB, Supervillain Labs, Deutsche Motors, Zangle, Avara, SK Telecom, and the list goes on. Finally, the Aptos experience doesn't end with the last step of the day. Participants will also enjoy post-event happy hours and excursions that highlight why Seoul is the hub of innovation.
Thanks, Jerome. Now back to the episode.
Yeah, I'd love to dive more into that because that word on-chain agents or AI agents have been thrown around by a lot of VCs in the past year or so, but not a lot of people are truly understanding of what they actually are. So you guys have a very ambitious goal of creating this on-chain agent economy. So what exactly does this mean? Does it mean we're going to get a lot of agents? And what are these agents doing?
Yeah, so I would say high level, I mean, there's a lot of different like definitions of what an agent is or can do, but I would say at a high level, it's just a piece of software or system that uses an LLM as its engine. And so this kind of piece of software that uses LLM as engine has access to like functions, and you can call them like a toolbox. So the software has a toolbox, it's driven by an LLM, and it performs specific tasks or some end goal. All of those tools contain the necessary descriptions for the agent to properly use them. What that means in the on-chain world or in this crypto world is that, most tasks can be automated. And if you start to think of it from like a trading perspective, which is quite like literally the largest use case, you need to add in like a wallet as well. So the powerful side of like when you hear autonomous agents is that it needs to perform transactions on behalf of a user without their permission or manual intervention.
I think just to kind of clarify there, because obviously trading bots already exist, but trading bots are often not powered by LLMs or AI, but they're just if-then statements. So for instance, if Ethereum hits like $1,800, then I would deploy X percentage of my portfolio. If it hits this, then, it will sell. So those bots already exist. So what is the difference between, an AI trading, agent versus like something like that, which is just like an if-then bot?
Yeah, I would say the biggest part is like the reasoning power behind the LLM. So there's the if this, then that kind of architecture built into agents, but you could actually elevate its capabilities by adding in this reasoning capability. So there's a whole spectrum of how much you want the LLM to reason. There are certain kind of components. If we start to like look at these components of like triggers and actions, triggers being like listening events. So quite simply, like the example you gave, the trigger would be if the price is at this, then the action is buy ETH, right? If you wanted to add on some capabilities of adding either analysis of like technical indicators, plugging an API to like, let's say the Edgar API for the SEC, they release like a 100-page memo. For a human to read that and even decipher what it is, it might take a long time. But if you wanted to act quickly, you could actually feed that directly into an LLM as an API into the agent, analyze the sentiment, or let's say, a month ago, was the ETF approved? And quite quickly, you could get an answer and then make an action based off of that. So I would say the spectrum revolves around, do you want the LLM to reason around the entire architecture? Do you want the LLM to do summarization? Do you want it to make some sort of sentiment decision for you? And so each of these steps, you could actually plug in the LLM to either elevate or expedite like the decision-making process for that bot.
And I think a lot of people, when I ask them about crypto AI agents, the example they always give is kind of these conditional trading bots, or maybe a bot that helps you optimize yield. Are there other kind of big use cases or big opportunities you see for AI agents, or is this mostly like a tool for, say, DeFi degens to trade?
No, I think so. The larger vision, at least for us at Spectral, is to start with like trading agents. And I think we start there just because like, the financial use cases across crypto are quite prevalent. And it's like the largest kind of like market capture for market demand. Overall, the larger vision, though, is actually to try to kind of abstract away the clunkiness of the UX of wallets. So it's like rethinking the gateway into Web3. And so right now, if you wanted to do anything in Web3, you have to basically onboard into a wallet. You probably need to have some level of understanding what your private key and public key does, some level of understanding about these permissions or these signatures that you're signing. A lot of this is that a lot of stuff that most people actually don't care about. And so if you're able to kind of shift into an intent-centric world, you actually have agents that do things on your behalf. So one kind of simple thing, a few months ago, Coinbase started onboarding people from their smart wallet into their on-chain base wallet, right? So what happens actually for that retail user that actually just transfers a bunch of money that they had in their Coinbase account into their on-chain wallet? They still have to hit into this dead end of actually figuring out what to do after that. Imagine that this user actually transfers this money, quite easy to do on Coinbase, but now you have this kind of encumbrance. So from there, you could actually have automations or agents that do quite simple like automations and actions for you once you get to that phase. So it could be that you want to rebalance your portfolio, you want to bridge to another chain, you want to like allocate or stake ETH plus take a loan out, etc. You could actually have these preset functions that agents could actually do on behalf of users.
So just to put it in concrete terms, do you mean there will be an interface for users whereby maybe a normie can just put in like someone who's not very native to crypto, doesn't understand, how to bridge between different chains, they can simply put in like a textual command, and then the agent using an LLM basically translates a textual demand to maybe a algorithm on chain to exercise those kind of actions, and thereby you just completely remove the need for the user to interact with the chain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly what we do. So we basically generate the code for these actions based off of the text or intent typed in natural language. So you quite literally just type in, I want to bridge my money or my entire portfolio or my ETH over to this chain, and then stake it in Aave, take a loan out, and then stake that ETH into ETH staking platform. And then it would actually do all of that for you.
I'm curious, like, where does the AI element come in as well? Because, obviously some of the simpler actions, you can do it in just the conditionals as well. I think even now with applications like Zapper, for instance, you can create zaps where you abstract away the multiple steps that you need to execute a transaction. Let's say I want to stake on Lido, maybe on Zapper, I just hit, one zap and it helps me kind of wrap my ETH or, stake my ETH with Lido, and then send a staked ETH to my wallet. Why is AI kind of required, and what are some the use cases that most require AI?
Yeah, I think the intent translation from like text to transaction is important. So translating your intent into what that end state wants to be, you use it in the beginning there, but also there's updates around like reasoning of after you have that like action done. So it might be that to monitor market sentiment, and so analyze like or copy trade like a wallet on chain, or to copy trade multiple wallets, or to analyze like large swaths of data. Analyzing these large swaths of data is probably like the biggest use case for those kind of like triggers, where you could say daily analyze a sentiment of ETH on Twitter. If it's like too bullish, start to like sell off ETH, or check the technical indicator of this, hit the 100 SMA across the 200, plus sentiment on ETH is X, and then, check the Ethereum Foundation wallet, did a dump, then, make some action based off of that. So the way we actually try to do this, and there's a larger kind of problem in the agentic world in Web2 as well, is that once you give the LLM too much access or too much reasoning capability, it actually becomes a little unpredictable. And so this is kind of the larger problem of like this deterministic environment of crypto versus a probabilistic environment of like AI. And you need to find some sort of middle ground there. So at the current state of the state-of-the-art models, like we try to veer on the conservative side, especially when it becomes like financial applications or transactions. So what that means is in this kind of if this then that architecture, we use LLMs when it's needed. If you need like a price of something, we just use an oracle or an API. If you want to check like the SMAs or some technical indicator, you don't need an LLM to figure out what that means and then try to reason from it, but you just use that API. If you need to analyze sentiment on Twitter, you wouldn't want, to read every single tweet and analyze it, right? So you'd leave some sort of like subjectiveness to the LLM that it can do this quite quickly and efficiently, but the same way that you, a human, would actually read each tweet and have a different perspective, this LLM may have that as well. So that's the trade-off.
I see. So it sounds like whenever vast amounts of inputs are required, then the LLM will come basically to help you abstract some sort of, synthesis from that input, versus like if it's something very simple, like you said, like if you just need one indicator, then AI is probably like an overkill. You can just kind of Google the kind of moving averages for ETH, for instance. Is that kind of the roughly the two buckets?
No, I agree with that initial, like the statement around like it's probably overkill in the beginning, but I actually do think that in the long run, even after you create that initial position, right, the reasoning after that and actually monitoring like different like sentiment or different indicators and reasoning them actually holistically, like the AI and LLMs are actually quite powerful in that sense. So for a human to actually act on that like reasoning or research that a human has to do manually may not be as efficient or optimized as an LLM to do that.
Got it. And we're going to focus on kind of what is the actual LLM you guys are using, the construction of it, how do you make sure the verification works. For instance, like if I put an input here, how do I know the output I get is actually from the LLM versus, some other model? But before that, I want to zoom out a little bit because earlier this week, I read a really interesting blog post by Vitalik, who was writing about crypto and AI. So I'd like to share about kind of the 4 areas that he thinks crypto and blockchains can be most impactful for AI. And I'm curious whether your views converge or where you see Spectral fit in. So the 4 use cases here, just for our listeners, number 1 would be AI as a player in a game. So for example, these will be AI bots that optimize for yield or AIs that bet on prediction markets. Number 2 would be AI as an interface to this game. So for instance, a user like myself, I would use this AI bot to parse a contract and detect whether this contract is dangerous or maybe it's a scam. Number 3 would be AI as the rule setter for the game. So these would be like things like AI DAOs that adjudicate the outcome of a prediction market instead of just having people fight over, hey, who actually won the presidential election? You just have AIs kind of resolve it. Or, even a DAO that select what data goes into training a model. And then the final example he offered was AI as the objective of the game. This, to me, was the most confusing one. This was basically designing a blockchain that allows AI to be used, which wasn't very clear to me what it meant. But I'm curious, is that kind of roughly your mental model as well? And where do you see Spectral fitting in that mental model?
Yeah, I think, agents, again, like we said earlier, it provides like a wide array of use cases. Like initially what Vitalik mentions around gaming, like as a player, there's different like kind of levels of how much involvement you want the AI to have versus like a human, right? So again, like this efficiency and like analyzing large swaths of data is like a huge boost to like above like human capabilities of understanding reasoning, right? So in games, like you could actually have like NPCs as players, you could actually engage. And I think like we're actually working with a game right now called State PvP. That's kind of a spin-off of World PvP. And in that context, you may analyze like countries and the amount of like stake in each of those countries and actually reallocate your assets according to which one you think might win, or even at the last minute, much more efficiently than a human could do, actually reallocate your balances across different countries or states in this game, right? So this is like kind of like a use case there. I think in the larger context of like, I think in the third point that Vitalik mentioned around like AI as like, kind of like a assistant or something like that. It's touching about the same kind of concepts that we talked about as like this new gateway. So simplifying this like UX of like wallet clunkiness, I think generally across the board is going to help everyone. And it doesn't necessarily need to be financially related, right? It could be even just monitoring. If you wanted to, as a protocol, if we wanted to monitor our foundation wallets or any kind of tracking and then send a Slack message for that, like that's like something simple where you could analyze like who the wallet was. Are they like verified? Then send a Slack message or an email. These are all like simple automations that you could do. But I think in leveling that up even more is that you could actually set reasoning capabilities to have further actions beyond that a human might be able to do and not do in time. And then the final thing around the blockchain itself, I think that's like quite abstract to me as well. I didn't fully grasp like what Hugh's end state was for there. We have ideas around there as well, like what we're going to launch for like the infra-chain. But yeah, I could think we can get into that in a bit.
Yeah, actually, why don't we dive into what you guys are actually building in Spectral? So my understanding is there's 2 big parts to what you guys are working at least that's announced so far. One is the infra-chain, which we'd like to understand what that is, and then also syntax. So let's start with infra-chain first, because I think that's a little bit more complex. What exactly is infra-chain? Is this an L1 that you guys are building, an L2, or what is it used for?
Yeah, so right now it's more of like a protocol or a network. We do have some designs around like launching it as an L2, but I think like contextually around like how many L2s are launching and like if it's actually like needed. Like right now we're deployed on Base. We may spin off into our own L2 or just build out a protocol on Base itself. But the real end state of all of this is actually to try to migrate all of the agents on chain. So when an agent is generated by a creator, you actually generate like a smart contract for the agent itself. And in that contract and the metadata basically includes all of the instructions, all the references to the tools and APIs it needs. And when a user request comes in to use this agent, it passes off to our executioner node, which is kind of like an operator node. So it takes that request, checks all the instructions and APIs that it needs, and it executes that transaction on behalf of the user. On the infra chain, this executioner node becomes like modularized and where anybody can become a node itself. And so anytime a request comes into that agent ABC contract, any node or miner in this example processes that transaction the same way they would on an L2 or an L1. And so getting that transaction fee is part of being that node. Now, the contract itself becomes pretty interesting because every time a creator deploys an agent, there's ERC20s attached to that agent ABC contract. And so those ERC20s actually reflect ownership of that contract. And so those are freely tradable, freely like circulating on the market. And so the interesting thing here is that each contract actually has like almost like generating revenue. It could be a trading model. It could be some sort of like informational agent. It doesn't matter what it is, but you actually can speculate on the value of that agent. And then the ownership comes from like buying and selling that ERC20. So then there ends up being like this secondary order of like economics of like buying and selling this kind of like miniature company that has revenue. You could build a model around it. You could speculate on it. You could actually pass DAO governance around what the agent contract does. And then in addition to that, each of these contracts have like what we're going to be calling like an ANS, which is an agent name service, which is equivalent to like ENS. So the whole infra-chain is really about like co-ownership and collaborative ownership of these like agents instead of like centralized ownership of like our backend. Also decentralizing our backend, this execution node, so it becomes this global network where each of these nodes is processing transactions the same way a miner would. And then finally, this registry of agents, which is like the ANS.
And Sishir, you made a really interesting point there about some of these agents being kind of almost like companies where you can bet on their value and they will be revenue generating. Can you give like a example of what a revenue generating agent would look like? Like what would it be doing? Who would be some of the customers who would be paying to use this?
Yeah, I think so. I think all the trading ones, ideally are incentivized to create revenue, right? That's how you make a successful agent. I think, well, this ties into one other point here around the monetization of agents. So creators and users of these agents, creators are incentivized to create useful agents that the market demands because every time a user makes a transaction with that agent, there's a small transaction fee the same way you would go on Uniswap or MetaMask and make a swap. That transaction fee is actually shared with the creator of that agent. So what that means in this kind of whole gallery of agents, creators are incentivized to create products or agents that the market needs, which then they kind of feed into that revenue because of the user using it on the transaction fees. So on what are examples there, like these could be all across like the trading like kind of spectrum, right? Anything that generates revenue. I would say if there was like a big name agent creator, like a market maker or some like VC fund or big trader on Twitter, they could probably draw in a lot of attention like by creating like an agent, which then users would use that agent. That transaction fees that the users generate are shared with that agent. But with this co-ownership model on the infra-chain, then everybody actually could get a piece of that agent and then speculate the value would increase because there's like kind of belief there. Same way like ERC20s and like, secondary markets exist.
And are there kind of examples of this type of on-chain agent economy outside of a trading use case that you foresee maybe in the long-term future as well?
Yeah, I think so. I think around like informational agents, like we built like a DevRel agent working with like Filecoin. And so what that means is basically we trained an agent to basically read like Slack and Discord and other like community messages. And these DevRels really just answer the same questions over and over again, right? So building and training a model or an agent that understands like what type of product this new user would want to do, asking questions like how often do you need to access these files, what are the size of these files, etc., pushing them to a specific product, and then actually allowing them to upload a file directly to IPFS right from the agent. So it doesn't always necessarily need to be financially related, but I think there are kind of like this B2B aspect of agents as well, which becomes interesting.
Before recording this episode, I was trying to think of, okay, what are some comparable projects here just to help me understand this by analogy. And one of the projects that I found was actually from like 2017 called Numeraire. So they are basically like a market of, they are an open market for data scientists around the world to submit their best models at predicting stock prices. And I think whoever has the closest prediction and is used by this kind of decentralized hedge fund gets a split of the profits. So are there elements of that you guys have looked at before and say and kind of thought, hey, that's quite similar, or what are the biggest differences between something like a Numeraire, which is the decentralized market of effectively agents competing to predict stock market returns, and something like the trading agent economy on Spectral that you mentioned?
Yeah, very similar. So actually, when we first started Spectral, like Numeraire was one of the big inspirations around this kind of decentralized machine learning network. And this kind of like competitive nature of these like market dynamics. I think when you boil it down, it becomes like actually that it becomes like simple market dynamics, which is exactly why we're building Syntax to be like an open marketplace of agents. So another simple way is just it's an app store for like agents. And so the same way you see very similar apps on the app store, like, there's 1,000 calculator apps or even more than that. And same way here in the agent world, people will be creating like quite similar strategies, but creating an edge to create that incentive for users to use their agent is going to really help like the market by creating these refined agents, but also will actually really proliferate this agent economy, right? So that's really important. And same way in Numerai that like these traders are battling against each other with trading strategies, these agent applications are going to probably follow the same dynamics on the market.
I think one of the interesting differences between Numerai and Spectral, at least based on my understanding, is that for Numerai, it's very much a black box, right? All of these data scientists or market makers or hedge funds competing for the rewards, you don't know what they're doing in the background. They're just doing their own models, and their models is where the alpha comes from. It's how well they can predict stock price. That's the alpha. They don't want to give that away. But my understanding is for Spectral, because the agents are on chain, a lot more of the kind of inner workings of the models are public. So can you kind of comment on, what aspect of the agents are actually, open source or public, or, what aspects are kept off chain? How do you balance the two?
Yeah. So the agents and the instructions, the registry are all on chain public, right? So anybody can parse that. The difference there, like I can probably just create the same strategy, create a similar agent, but then this is the same thing as like creating like the same exact app on an app store. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do better, right? Or even same thing as when you create like another new Twitter profile and you want to like try it. There's always an edge there in every kind of vertical across like industries, right? What isn't hidden or what will be private is like knowledge bases. So you can upload to have some proprietary knowledge base for this agent that isn't publicly available to the market. And so that can actually always create an edge for you.
Got it. And which parts of the, I'm curious in terms of the verification aspect of it, because like the example I mentioned before, how do I know that an on-chain agent is using an LLM that it claims to be using versus, just, a bunch of guys in the background, hard coding in the outputs?
Yeah, I would say it's even more than that, like not just the LLM, but like how do you know if, like right now we are the single executioner node, right? So a request goes to the agent, we take that request, we see all the APIs that it has to listen to and all the LLM analysis that it has to do, and we actually execute that transaction. So this execution node has a lot of trust behind it, right? So this is why we need to kind of evolve into like the decentralization of the infra-chain, because then we can't be that single executioner node. Same way in like L1s and L2 designs, you need multiple miners to basically process these transactions, and then you find consensus. So in the infra chain, when we modularize this backend or this execution node, anybody can become this node or this equivalent of a miner. The second layer of that is actually, how do you know that this execution node is actually calling the right API and returning the right information? So there's a few different options here that we're going through. There's like TLS notary working with like Eternus, on researching that side. There's also like ZK proofs, but a lot of this also has to come around like the latency. There's trade-offs on each of these designs, but that's really the high level logic, is that there has to be validation and verification of what this executioner node is doing on behalf of that agent.
Yeah, and I think one of the big challenges is, what some people have proposed that we're going to move all of the computation on chain, but I forgot who this was, but in one of the, I think it was maybe an ETH Denver talk, someone mentioned that the cost to do one single kind of matrix calculation with Llama 3 on chain would cost like $1 billion in gas. So it seems like bringing that computation from the actual LLMs on chain in order to enforce verifiability probably isn't an option, right? So I'm guessing even in the future, AI agents still will have the majority of the computation, or if not all of it, completely off chain. And the missing part is we need to figure out how to actually verify that the computations are done, right? Is that one of the kind of unsolved challenges of crypto AI that you see today?
No, I think it's solvable if you don't want to put everything on chain. Like if you're okay with this like off-chain verification, then it's solvable. We went through a lot of this with like using ZKML, and anything like, when we started building these credit scoring models, it's feasible. But anything bigger than that, especially with the size of these LLMs, and if you want to continue using like state-of-the-art LLMs, it's not practical at the moment.
Got it. So I guess zooming to a higher level, because in your white paper you mentioned that it's very important to have transparency in creating an AI agent, right? So just to synthesize here, what parts of an AI agent needs to be transparent? Like, what are the important parts to keep transparent?
So the most important parts are basically like the instructions and like the toolbox, quote unquote, that it uses, right? So you need to know that what is this like kind of this, if this, then that, which parts of the LLM that it's using in these triggers versus these actions, and what APIs it's calling. and that it has to do kind of like consistently and reliably. And I think this is like also like another talking point is around agents and their reliability. And so when you have an LLM that's probabilistic, you're always going to get like some slightly variation of an answer, right? So if you have financial agents, you need to know that it consistently acts in the same way that you want it to, right? So I would say the instructions, the APIs, the execution code all have to be completely transparent and verifiable.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point as well earlier about how AI agents are often probabilistic, right, versus crypto, which is deterministic. And just to simplify for our listeners, what this means is, for AI LLMs, right, if I input the same thing into the same model, but let's say the GPUs are configured slightly differently, then I could get, different examples. I think the example that I offered in another episode was, let's say I want, someone, I want to see Jason in a t-shirt. And, this model could give me Jason in a blue t-shirt, and the exact same model with the backend configured slightly differently could give me Jason in a red t-shirt. So how do AI agents contend with the fact that some of these inputs might have non-deterministic outputs? How do you kind of explain to users who are so used to a deterministic output in all of their Web 2, Web 3 executions, where you input something, you expect this to happen?
Yeah, that's a huge problem like we try to tackle. I think it's across the agent space. It's like generally like a wide problem. I think the easy thing in Web 2 is that you get to rely on the fact that most of these are informational agents. In Web 3, if you want to really make like a dent in the market, it has to be kind of financial based. And so when you start to kind of veer into this kind of more sensitive financial space, you kind of need to be more conservative in how you architect the agent. And so this kind of harkens back into the earlier point around how much do you need the LLM in this architecture, right? So where do you want to use it, and where do you need more deterministic inputs and outputs? And so we try to basically divide where the LLM needs like use cases around analyzing large swaths of data, reasoning, and then separating it from the ideas around like very deterministic API inputs of like around oracles, around prices, simple data, like resolving addresses, contract addresses, etc. And then in terms of like trying to verify this, we always tried to like show the user the code and visualize like what the agent is doing. So before they deploy it, before they actually deploy the agent to the gallery, before the user creates a job, you see what's called like a mermaid chart, which is basically like an if this, then that flow chart. And then from there, you also see the executable code. And from there, then you can actually verify and validate what is this agent about to do for you.
I see. And I think just to put that into more concrete terms, I know you wanted to share a demo for Spectral as well. So for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, you can view on the screen. We're about to screen share.
Also, this is like an alpha. We're planning to launch this about a month from now. So right now, what you see here is just the general homepage. What you would do is go to create a new agent, and then you would actually try to just actual natural language conversation, actually just say what you want to buy. I'll start with like something simple. So like, if the 100 SMA crosses the 200 SMA, buy a configurable amount of ETH with, let's say, a configurable amount of USDC. So you can see here on the right, like it starts to fill in these fields. So it'll basically respond to restore the initial name, description, instructions, and welcome message. And to refine the behavior, could you please specify how you'd like the agent to access SMA data? So do you have a specific data source? So you could even just say no, and it'll default to like the SMA API that we have and the TA indicators. Do you want any specific conditions or limits on the trade? You could even just say no here. Okay, so the user-defined parameters, this is like an important kind of distinction here. When you're creating the agent, you could actually leave parameters as like floating parameters that the user could actually input. So amount of ETH they want to buy, the amount of USDC they want to purchase, that should actually be like open fields. So we could say ready to generate code. So what you see here on the right, like it names the agent like SMA crossover trading agent. Description is like this agent buys a configurable amount of ETH with a configurable amount of USDC when the 100 and SMA crosses the 200 SMA. It monitors this, it sets up a welcome message, and it even creates like a prompt example. What's happening on the back end is actually taking my prompts and actually like generating it and breaking it up into like listen, evaluate, and act. So what that means is like listen is like what indicators and APIs is it listening for? Evaluate is taking the listening indicators and seeing, did this like actually did the 100 SMA cross the 200 SMA? Or if it's like, did the price of ETH hit this? Did the price of ETH hit that? And then the action is to say, okay, what do you do if these triggers hit? So from there, we could actually see that like the code would be generated, we deploy a job, and then from there, a user would be able to come into like this agent gallery. So you go to Explore Agents, and you could see like a sentiment agent, a price fetcher, let's see the SMA crossover trading agent. And then you'd see like this agent monitors 100 and 200 SMA. Let's see if we could deploy a job. Let's say I want to deploy a job. So it'll ask you like, what is the token you want to use to purchase Ethereum? Since we made that configurable earlier, you could actually just use USDC and just say how much you want to use. Let's use USDC and buy $1 of USDC of the. So it'll just like, this is what I was talking about earlier. We want to verify with the user of what it's doing. So from token USDC, the amount is 1 USDC, 2 token is ETH. So now it'll ask you the interval at which you would like the job to run. Every 10 minutes, every 2 hours. So we could just say like, every 1 hour is fine. And in 24 hours. So on the back end, it's actually generating a lot of this code. And what you'll see here, please confirm this looks good. I'll deploy the job. Yeah, confirmed. So some of these settings here on the right, you could start to see. So you could start to set like autonomy settings around the agent. If you wanted to be in conservative mode, if you want to be in degen mode, which means basically like you could set guardrails around how often you want this to do. Set some upper limit of how much each transaction does, how much gas you want to pay. This is where you would see like these jobs. And then you would actually have more information around like a simulation when you could actually paper trade this instead.
Yeah, how complex can the prompts get, right? Can it be kind of, can I have like 12 different inputs here or 100 different inputs, and can the agent itself also learn over time?
Yeah, exactly. So it could have, as many like triggers as you want. So you could say things like, plug into Twitter sentiment, analyze like these 10,000 tweets, plug into the SEC API, plug into Kaido, which we actually use as one of the APIs. So you could actually copy trade some wallets, monitor these wallets, plus monitor these APIs off-chain, and then make some action. So there's no like limit on number of agents. It'll generate the code. And then from there, like what you would do is basically the reasoning, the second layer order of this is it has memory. So it'll learn from your past ones. So if you wanted to update this job, you could actually ask it, how did these past transactions perform? What should I actually make some improvements on? Is 100 SMA backtesting like actually good? Should I actually change that to the 50 or 150 SMA, something like that?
Because that is the exciting part for me personally, because in the creation of the agent, effectively, I could also just do this on ChatGPT, right? I could basically say, hey, I want to create a bot, publish some Solidity code that fulfills these criteria. I think that part of the business is very easy to be disrupted. There are a lot of ChatGPT kind of wrapper businesses as well. But then the self-reinforcing, the fact that this agent has memory and you can kind of learn over time and become more and more complex, I think that's really where the moat for these agents come from. Like not everybody can create these agents or at least have as much data as these agents, especially if you guys have that first mover advantage. I'm curious, like if we zoom out a bit, right, where do you see the biggest moat for Spectral is, especially as, if the AI agent stream does become a reality for more and we get more kind of creators of AI agents, not just through Spectral, but through, other projects as well, where does the edge for you guys lie?
Yeah. I really believe that in this, like the market dynamics of this kind of like agent economy or this agent marketplace really like would set us apart, because I think a lot of like the way a lot of the other agent projects are kind of working is this kind of 1-to-1 aspect ratio, where a user comes in, talks to like a single agent, sets up some sort of automation, then it does it for you. But I think like the difference here, the edge that we can create is actually refining that entire experience by allowing creators to create like in-demand agents for the market and where there is demand. So when you go into this like gallery, the same way you would go to like a GPT gallery, you start to see different agents for different use cases. So what we tried to really do here, and one of the larger goals, is actually not to confine it to like expert traders or expert Web3 users. So there will be very similar, like simple, like dollar cost average agents, like something really simple, or even really complex trades using like a ton of different APIs and like monitoring tools. So trying to find like where this like initial user is is really based on like market dynamics. And then from there, what I think will really set us apart is all these like on-chain like ownership of agents, this collective ownership, and the secondary like economic effects of these like miniature like agent companies, and this like governance of the long term, owning these agents, the registries, all of these things on around the infra-chain should really create like a strong like decentralized moat.
And I'm if I think from a more kind of sci-fi angle as well, but just really zoom out, I think some of the slightly scary implications are also for security, right? Well, what if I go in Spectral and I create a bot that, then the only prompt I give it is basically help me find the biggest exploit across all of these, big TVL projects, contracts right now, and help me exploit it and send the proceeds to this wallet. Do you foresee that being, something that agents can be used for?
Do I foresee it? Yes. Like it's definitely going to be possible. I think there are like a lot of companies out there that are trying to thwart this as well, right? So the company like Test Machine that we work with, we have a smart contract auditing agent available now that you could just like upload some SOL files, upload your smart contract code, it'll audit for you. And they actually have like basically like reinforcement learning agents that will really try to like break the code. So there are both sides of this, and same problem across like AI and like the real world as well in Web 2. So yeah, to answer your question, yeah, I think it will be possible. We'll try to do everything we can just to stay on like the good guy side.
Yeah, we actually invested in a company, I think almost 2 years ago, with a bunch of cybersecurity PhDs, and they were trying to use AI to basically learn the most common exploits and parse contracts and create kind of free code fuzzing as well. I feel like a lot of very specific use cases like that for on-chain things can actually just become agents on Spectral as well and just be open to everybody.
Yeah, that's the idea. It's like try to incentivize like the beginning through like financial use cases, but actually that's larger use cases around like informational plus like automations, plus like rethinking the gateway.
So I guess another sci-fi-ish question for you is, where does the line between agents and protocols begin to blur? Because it's not that far-fetched to think that, hey, eventually someone's going to create an agent that says, hey, create an agent that's exactly like MakerDAO, or allow people to borrow against each other with these parameters, and you will allow for new collateral once this certain liquidity threshold is held. And then you're suddenly, all the protocols can be agents as well. Like, is that like a path that you foresee as well?
Yeah, I think it's super beneficial to protocols actually, like where they can actually, this whole kind of meme around composability that's been in the space for years. I think agents actually could fulfill this in a really meaningful way. And so what I mean by that is like there could be an agent for a lending agent, there could be a DEX agent, and then there could be like, let's say, a staking agent. So the DEX agent could trade or swap for you, initially take a loan. Let's say the common thing of like looping ETH becomes like super simple with agents. Like you swap your USDC to ETH, stake it into like a lending protocol, take that initial like additional ETH, stake it, take the ST ETH, take another loan, and then loop it for X amount of times, right? Some simple automation on that. And then you could have a separate agent that's monitoring, maybe you're monitoring wallets on Lido, plus you're monitoring sentiment on ETH, and monitoring like the Ethereum Foundation, like wallet, right? So then it could update how much you're staking. Your risk management becomes like completely abstracted away because you have another separate agent there. And this idea of composability across these different things playing with each other, like just to touch on this earlier point, like this could be done in an automated way where it's just a bot, right? But I think actually democratizing access to this type of like kind of sophisticated system, agents really just simplify this for like a retail user to have the same like level of access that like some big institution.
That makes a lot of sense as well. So it seems like there's two big parts to Spectral that I'm seeing from the outside. Number one is the kind of democratizing creation of bots just through natural language, right? You don't have to know how to code. You don't even have to know crypto that much in order to participate or experiment on chain with these bots. The other part is kind of creating this economy of agents and then just generating new use cases. And I think one thing that you guys really talked about in the white paper is allowing these bots to talk to each other as well, which I don't think we touched on as much on the podcast. Can you kind of explain to us, how does that work? What does it mean for different bots to talk to each other or communicate with each other?
Right now, like when we get to the infra-chain, each of these agents are separate contracts. Essentially, they're just smart contracts with a contract address. And this is actually why this ANS, or this name registry, is important. When there are verifiable like registry of agents, then agent A, that's like, let's say a swapping agent, needs to swap and take a loan out on a lending agent. They need to know that this agent isn't malicious. They need to know that it's verifiable, that they can actually swap or trade or take a loan with it. And so if there's like a strategy or an agent that somebody else builds, a creator, to use these two other agent contracts, and this third agent is basically saying, make a swap with agent A, swapping agent, then take a loan with agent B, lending agent, this all becomes like completely autonomous. And these are three autonomous entities that have three different strategies, different tools, different instructions, different registries, all working with each other in like an automated fashion. And the access point is super simple. It's literally natural language where a user is just saying, hey, I want to do this, this, and this. And it actually just routes to between these contracts. Before, I would say this is like quite a complex strategy. Like, these types of like access points are really sitting behind some sort of like developer experience.
Yeah, and just to wrap things up here, Sishir, I think this is one of the most interesting and intriguing verticals in crypto, just because if I think about every single other vertical in crypto, there's always analogies, right? NFT is basically like the collectible world or the art world. DeFi is in many ways recreating some of the financial rails that we see in TradFi already. There's a lot of lessons we can learn from there. But with AI agents, I really can't think of an analogy in the kind of quote unquote normal world. So I'm curious, like in terms of the inspirations that you guys had, or the conviction that you have that this will happen in the future, where we will have an economy of AI agents. Where does that come from? Like, are you seeing things that have happened before that's informed this, or things that are similar and are happening now outside of crypto?
I would say a lot of the inspiration comes from this kind of like lackluster involvement of retail, like at least for me personally. I think we've seen at least a lot of people that I know, I think across there's like this theme that like retail, in order to get like the onboard the next billion people, like we need to figure out like UX. I think this like mantra has been around in the industry for a long time, but there hasn't been a meaningful like leveling up or like kind of breaking down this like UX. We've always relied on wallets. We've always relied on like this whole key management service, and like DeFi has also been like kind of, now we've seen it evolve into like access to like institutions. And so if we really want to like break over this inspiration, at least for us, really becomes like abstracting away the entire UX. And part of this is like, there's like UX, then there's like developer experience, there's like user experience, developer experience. And one thing we're really kind of like prescient about and trying to be really prudent about is like this agent experience. And so what does an agent experience mean to this DevX and this UX? And so trying to like add that into this whole kind of circle is really important to actually break down this barrier of like user access in general.
Yeah, it's super fascinating to share. And I think there's a lot for our listeners to dig into in terms of playing around with Spectral as well. So in terms of what's next on the roadmap, or where can people learn more about Spectral, what can you share here?
Yep. So you can go to Spectral Labs on Twitter. We have a Discord. You can get the link on our website, spectrallabs.xyz. What's next on the roadmap? I would say we're doing internal testing on the beta right now. In about 2 to 3 weeks, we'll open it up to like a beta round of early testers. And then after that, we'll have the public launch. So most likely around, I'd say a month or two from now, October, we'll have like this full-fledged.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to check that out. And I really would love for our listeners to go check out some of these things as well. I think this is one of the more interesting and sci-fi corner of crypto that I'd love to see more development in. So thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for explaining to us what agents are here.
Cool. Thanks, Jason.
Hey there, Jason here. Thanks for supporting another episode of the BlockCrunch podcast. If you enjoyed this, please give us a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and make sure you subscribe on YouTube so you can check out our founder interviews, our roundtable series on our venture thesis, as well as our On a Tangent sub-series about our current market views. And as always, you can reach out to me on X at Mr. Jason Choi, and I'll make sure to read every comment related to this episode. So I'll see you next time.